He thought comfort was love, until he saw his starving mother rummaging through the trash. The truth hit him like a punch to the gut. He had neglected the one who needed him most. Now, he carries the guilt and the mission to restore the dignity he allowed to vanish. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. The rain hammered against the windows of the 18th floor office in the commercial tower on Park Avenue. Robert Miller watched New York City blur into a smear of yellow and red lights below as the clock on the wall read 11:40 p.m. Another night consumed by work, another meeting that had stretched beyond reason, another closed deal that would bring impressive numbers to the company's quarterly report. At 42, Robert had built an empire in the medical equipment import and distribution sector. He was respected in the market, feared by competitors, and admired by his partners. His routine had followed a relentless pattern ever since he became CEO of the company he'd founded 15 years earlier. He woke up at 5:30 a.m., arrived at the office before 7 and rarely returned home before midnight. Weekends were just days without a suit and tie, but never without work. He placed the last documents in his Italian leather briefcase, shut down his computer, and walked to the private elevator. In the polished mirror of the doors, he briefly observed his own reflection. Dark hair with a few grey strands at the temples, deep-set dark circles that no amount of sleep seemed to erase, the permanently tense expression of someone carrying the weight of decisions that affected hundreds of families. Robert no longer recognized himself in the idealistic young man who had once dreamed of revolutionizing the healthcare market in America. Now he was just a tired man, driven by targets, obligations, and the constant need to prove his worth through financial results. His driver was waiting in the garage, as he did every night. Robert dismissed him with a polite but firm gesture. He preferred to drive alone in these final moments of the day, when the silence of the car became the only space that was truly his. He started the engine of the black sedan and drove through the wet streets toward Greenwich, Connecticut, where the house he had bought 5 years ago, shortly after his wedding to Jessica, was located. The 3-story mansion was one of the most imposing on the street. Impeccably manicured gardens, strategic lighting that highlighted the modern architecture, an automatic gate that opened with a touch of the remote. Robert parked in the 6-car garage and turned off the engine. For a moment, he just sat there, listening to the sound of the rain on the roof. He felt a strange weight in his chest, a vague feeling that something wasn't right, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. He entered through the side door that led to the gourmet kitchen. The house was plunged into silence and shadow. Only a few emergency lights remained on in the hallways. Jessica was surely asleep. His wife maintained an intense social schedule during the day, frequenting exclusive clubs, organizing charity events, and managing the couple's image in New York's high society circles. At night, she rarely waited up for him. Robert climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, where the master suite was. He passed the guest room, now converted into an additional closet for Jessica, and continued down the hall. He was about to enter their bedroom when he heard a sound that made him stop, a muffled metallic noise coming from somewhere downstairs, something being dragged or moved, a sound completely out of place at this hour. His first thought was alarm. He went back down the stairs, this time more alert, trying to identify the source of the sound. He passed through the living room, the dining room, until he reached the laundry room at the back of the house. The door was ajar. A faint light seeped through the crack. Robert pushed the door open slowly, and what he saw froze him completely. On the cold ceramic floor, kneeling in an uncomfortable position, was his mother. Helen, 73 years old, was wearing pajamas he didn't recognize, stained and visibly dirty. Her white hair was disheveled, lacking its usual care. With trembling hands, she was rummaging through the trash bags next to the washing machine, pulling out empty packages, fruit peels, and leftover food. Robert felt the world collapse around him. Helen didn't notice her son's presence immediately. She continued to search the trash with a desperate urgency until she found something. Her hands quickly closed over a piece of a baguette that someone had thrown away. It was hard, stale, but she held it as if it were a precious treasure. It was at that moment that Robert made an involuntary movement and the door creaked. Helen turned abruptly, her eyes wide with shock and shame. She tried to hide the bread in her palms, bringing them behind her back like a child caught in a serious misdeed. Her eyes, the same eyes that had always looked at Robert with such pride and love, were now filled with tears and fear. "Mom." Robert's voice came out hoarse, almost unrecognizable. "What are you doing?" Helen lowered her head, unable to meet her son's gaze. Her hands still concealed the piece of bread. She was trembling, and Robert didn't know if it was from cold, fear, or shame. Maybe all three. "I was hungry, honey." Her voice was a fragile thread, almost inaudible. "I didn't get any food today. I tried to wait, but I was so hungry. I didn't want to bother anyone. I thought maybe here, in the trash, there might be something I could eat without anyone noticing." The words hit Robert like a series of punches to the stomach. He stood paralyzed for a few seconds, unable to process what he was hearing. His mother, his own mother, looking for food in the trash, inside his own house, saying she hadn't been fed all day. "What do you mean you didn't get any food?" Robert took a step forward, his voice louder than he intended. "You live here. This is your home too. How could you not have eaten all day?" Helen shrank back even more, and Robert realized she was afraid of him, afraid of her own son. That cut him deeper than anything else. "I'm sorry, honey. It was my fault. I must have done something wrong today. Jessica said I was causing trouble again, so she thought it was best for me to stay in my room. She said it was so I could think about my behavior, that when I learned how to behave properly, things would go back to normal." Robert felt his throat tighten. Every word from his mother's mouth was a revelation from a nightmare he didn't know he was living. "What kind of trouble did you cause, Mom?" Helen hesitated. She fidgeted with her fingers, still holding the hidden bread. "I asked to use the phone this morning. I wanted to call Susan, my friend from the church group. I haven't spoken to her in weeks. Jessica said the phone wasn't working, but I insisted. I don't think she liked that I insisted. After lunch, she took me to my room and said it was better for me to stay there until I learned not to question the decisions in the house." Reality began to reassemble itself in Robert's mind in a completely different way. Thoughts he had never allowed to take shape began to surface. Scattered memories he had always pushed to the back of his mind now came flooding forward. "How many times has this happened, Mom? How many times have you gone without food?" Helen didn't answer. She just lowered her head even more. "Mom, please, I need to know. How many times?" "A few times, honey. Not many. Only when I cause trouble. Jessica says it's for my own good, that I need to learn how to behave, that someone my age needs discipline." Robert felt a wave of nausea rise in his throat. He approached his mother and knelt beside her on the cold floor. He reached out his hand slowly, as if dealing with a frightened animal. He gently touched her arm. "You didn't cause any trouble, Mom. Do you hear what I'm saying? You did nothing wrong, ever. Please, give me that bread." Helen hesitated, but finally opened her hands. Robert took the hard, stale piece of bread and set it aside. Then, carefully, he helped his mother to her feet. She struggled to stand. Robert noticed she was much thinner than he remembered. When was the last time he had really looked at his own mother? When was the last time he had talked to her, sat with her, asked her how she was doing? "Let's go to the kitchen, Mum. I'll make you something warm to eat." "No, honey." Helen gripped his arm with surprising strength. "Please don't. If Jessica finds out I left my room, that you saw me like this, she'll be furious. I don't want to cause any more trouble. Please, just take me back to my room. I'll be quiet there. I promise I won't bother anyone else." Robert felt his heart shatter. His mother was scared. Scared of her own daughter-in-law, scared of being punished for being seen looking for food in the trash, scared of causing trouble for her own son. "Mum, look at me." Robert gently held her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "You are not going to be punished for anything. You are not going back to a locked room. We're going to the kitchen now, and I'm going to make you some food. After that, we're going to talk. We're going to talk about a lot of things I should have been paying attention to a long time ago." He led his mother to the main kitchen. He turned on the lights and sat her down on one of the chairs at the center island. Helen was visibly nervous, constantly glancing towards the stairs, as if expecting Jessica to appear at any moment. Robert opened the refrigerator. It was filled with fresh, imported organic food. A variety of fruits, specialty cheeses, prime cuts of meat, everything money could buy. He took out eggs, cheese, and ham, and started making an omelette. As he cooked, he watched his mother out of the corner of his eye. She was perched on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped in her lap, her posture tense like someone ready to flee at any moment. When the omelette was ready, Robert served it on a nice plate, added toast, fresh orange juice, and placed it all in front of his mother. Helen looked at the food as if she couldn't believe it was real. Her hands trembled as she picked up the fork. "You can eat, Mum. You don't have to be afraid." She started eating slowly, but soon her hunger took over. Robert noticed she ate with an urgency that went beyond physical hunger. It was the urgency of someone who doesn't know when their next meal will be. It was the urgency of someone used to having their food taken away before they could finish. While Helen ate, Robert sat beside her, and for the first time in months, maybe years, he truly observed his mother. The face marked with wrinkles he didn't remember being there before, the pale, almost translucent skin, the sunken eyes with deep, dark circles, the hands that trembled even as she held the fork, and her thinness, the frightening thinness he couldn't understand how he hadn't noticed before. "Mom, when was the last time you saw a doctor?" Helen stopped eating for a moment. She thought, as if struggling to remember. "A while ago, honey. I think about 4 months, maybe 5. Jessica said it wasn't necessary to go so often, that I was fine, that it was just old age." "Are you taking your blood pressure medication?" "I take it when Jessica gives it to me. Sometimes she forgets, or she says it's run out and she'll buy more later, but then it takes a while." Robert felt anger begin to boil inside him, a cold, controlled but intense anger. How had he not seen any of this? How had he let things get to this point? He had always believed Jessica took good care of his mother. He had always trusted that she treated Helen with kindness and respect. After all, Jessica always seemed so attentive, so concerned, so present whenever he was around. After Helen finished eating, Robert helped her up to her room on the 3rd floor of the house. The room was in a more isolated area, far from the master suite. When he opened the door, Robert felt as if he had entered another world. The room was freezing. The air conditioning had been turned off, despite the heat during the day. The windows were closed, the curtains drawn. There was a smell of mildew and stale air. The bed was unmade, with sheets that looked like they hadn't been changed in days. On the nightstand there was only an empty glass and some crumpled papers. Robert's stomach churned. This was his mother's room, the woman who had raised him alone, who had worked 3 jobs to ensure he had an education and opportunities. The woman who had never denied him anything, even when she had nothing to give. And now she lived in this cold, neglected, isolated space. "Mom, would you like to take a hot shower? I can get it ready for you." Helen looked at the bathroom in her room with a strange expression. "The shower's been broken, honey. The water doesn't get hot anymore. Jessica said she was going to call someone to fix it, but she hasn't yet." Robert went into the bathroom. It was small, basic, without the amenities of the other bathrooms in the house. He tested the shower. The water came out ice cold. It wasn't even connected to the house's central water heater. Someone had deliberately turned off the valve that allowed hot water to reach it. "You can use the guest suite bathroom on the 2nd floor, Robert said, returning to the room. "I'll get you clean towels and comfortable clothes. You take a hot shower and then you need to rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." But Robert knew he wouldn't be able to sleep. He knew that this night had changed something fundamental within him. For the first time in years, business, contracts, numbers, all of it had become utterly irrelevant. The only thing that mattered now was finding out exactly what was happening to his mother inside his own home. After helping Helen get settled in the guest suite bathroom, Robert went back to his mother's room. He turned on the overhead light and began to observe everything more closely. He went to the nightstand and opened the drawer. He found expired medications, crumpled prescriptions, and a small notebook where his mother made notes in a shaky hand. He picked up the notebook and began to read. The first few pages were simple notes, appointments, recipes, random thoughts. But as he read on, the content changed. Helen had started to log the days. Days she ate, days she didn't. Days she was allowed to leave her room, days she was locked in. There were notes about conversations with Jessica, about promises that weren't kept, about requests that were denied. One particular entry made Robert hold his breath. Today I tried to call Robert at his office. Jessica took the phone from my hand and said I was bothering him. She said I don't understand how hard he works, how tired he is, and that listening to me complain would only make things worse. She said if I really loved my son, I would leave him alone. I've been wondering if she's right. Maybe I am a burden. Maybe it would be better if I wasn't here anymore. Robert had to sit down on the bed. His hands were shaking so much he almost dropped the notebook. His mother had tried to contact him. She had tried to ask for help. And Jessica had intercepted her. How many other times had this happened? How many cries for help had his mother sent that never reached him? He kept reading, page after page of entries that painted an increasingly grim picture. Helen described being forbidden from entering the kitchen. She described meals being taken away before she finished eating. She described long hours locked in her room, without water, without food, without contact with anyone. She described conversations where Jessica told her she was getting too old, that she was becoming a problem, that maybe it was time to consider other options. The last entry was from 3 days ago. I can't take it anymore. I'm so hungry. I tried to leave my room at night to get something from the kitchen, but the door was locked from the outside. I yelled, but no one came. I cried for hours. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know if my son still wants me here. Sometimes I think Jessica is right, that I'm a burden, that it would be better for everyone if I just disappeared. But I don't want to disappear. I just want to be my son's mother again. I just want him to look at me the way he used to. Robert closed the notebook and put his face in his hands. Tears he hadn't shed in years began to stream down his face. How had he let this happen? How had he become so blind, so absorbed in his own world, that he hadn't noticed the suffering of the person he loved most in the world? He heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly wiped his face. Helen was returning from her shower, wrapped in a soft white robe. She looked a little better, but she still had that fearful expression in her eyes. "Mom, come here. Sit with me." He led her to the bed and sat beside her. He held her hands in his. They were cold, despite the hot shower. "I need you to be honest with me. Completely honest. You don't have to be afraid of anything, of anyone. I promise I will protect you. But I need to know everything. Everything. Can you do that for me?" Helen looked at her son. In her eyes was a mix of hope and disbelief, as if she wanted to believe, but was afraid it was just another illusion that would be shattered by morning. "Jessica is your wife, honey. I don't want to cause problems in your marriage. I don't want you to have to choose between us. And Mom, there's no. Mom, Joyce here. You're my mother. You raised me by yourself. You worked day and night to give me everything I needed. You gave up your own life to make sure I had a future. Now it's my turn to take care of you, and I won't fail again. So please tell me everything." And Helen told him. She told him about the first few months after the wedding, when Jessica was kind and attentive. She told him about the gradual change, about how things started to get worse as Robert spent more time at work. She told him about the subtle prohibitions that became more and more explicit, about the food that began to be rationed, about the phone that was disconnected from her room, about the door that started being locked from the outside, about the days spent in isolation, about the veiled threats, about the constant fear of being sent away somewhere. She also told him about the times she tried to talk to Robert, but Jessica was always there, always intervening, always changing the subject, always finding an excuse to keep her away from her son. She told him how Jessica had convinced her that Robert was too tired to worry about her, that she should be grateful to have a roof over her head and food, even if it was little. The more Helen spoke, the more Robert felt the reality he thought he knew completely crumble. He had been blind, deaf, absent. He had let his mother suffer because he was too busy building an empire that now seemed utterly meaningless. When Helen finished speaking, she was exhausted. Robert helped her lie down in the guest suite bed, where she could finally sleep in peace without fear of being locked in, without fear of waking up hungry, without fear of being punished for simply existing. He covered his mother with a soft blanket and kissed her forehead. "Sleep well, Mom. I'm going to fix everything. I promise." He left the room and closed the door slowly. He stood in the hallway for a long moment, just breathing deeply, trying to process everything he had discovered in the last few hours. Then, with firm steps, he walked toward the master suite, where Jessica was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the fact that her perfect world was about to fall apart. Robert entered the room and turned on the light. Jessica woke with a start, blinking against the sudden brightness. "Robert? What time is it? What happened?" He stood at the foot of the bed, observing the woman he had married 5 years ago. She was flawless, even having just woken up. Perfectly styled hair, an expensive nightgown, manicured skin. The picture of perfection. "We need to talk, now." Jessica sat up in bed, arranging the pillows behind her back. She smiled, that smile that always managed to diffuse any tension. "Honey, it's almost 2 in the morning. Can't it wait until tomorrow? You must be exhausted." "No, it can't wait." Robert crossed his arms. "I just found my mother looking for food in the trash. She told me she hasn't eaten all day. I want you to explain to me exactly what is happening in this house." Jessica's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but it quickly returned, even sweeter. "Oh, Robert, your mother has been so confused lately. I did give her food, just like I always do. She's the one who forgets. It's her age, honey. You know how it is." "My mother is not confused, Jessica. She was literally digging through trash, bags looking for something to eat. She had a piece of old bread hidden in her hands, afraid of being seen. Afraid, Jessica. Afraid inside her own home." Jessica sighed, with that expression of infinite patience she always used when dealing with matters related to Helen. "I understand you're worried, honey, but your mother really has been very forgetful. Sometimes she eats and then doesn't remember. Other times she hides food in her room and then says she didn't get any. It's common behavior for people her age. Maybe it's time we talked about getting professional help for her. Someone who understands these issues." Robert felt his anger rise, but he kept his voice controlled. "Tomorrow I'm cancelling all my appointments. I'm staying home all day, and we are going to have a very long conversation, the 3 of us, about a lot of things. For now, I just want you to know that my mother is sleeping in the guest suite where she'll be staying from now on." Jessica's eyes widened, and for a brief second, Robert saw something different in her face. Something that wasn't sweetness or concern. It was something cold, calculating. But the mask was back. So quickly he almost thought he'd imagined it. "Of course, honey. Whatever you think is best. We'll talk calmly tomorrow." Robert left the room without another word. He knew he wouldn't be able to sleep. He went down to the office he kept on the first floor of the house and turned on his computer. He had a lot to uncover, a lot to investigate, and a lot to fix. That rainy night in Connecticut marked the beginning of a journey that would completely change the course of his life. Robert Miller, the businessman who believed that money and comfort were the greatest proofs of love, was about to learn that sometimes the greatest danger to those we love is inside our own home, hidden behind perfect smiles and sweet words. And he was determined to uncover the whole truth, no matter how much it hurt. Chapter 2. Morning arrived without Robert having slept a wink. He spent the night in his office, reviewing every household financial document from the last 6 months. Bank statements, credit card bills, receipts, everything he could find in Jessica's organized files. What he discovered left him increasingly disturbed. In recent months, Jessica's personal spending had skyrocketed. Designer clothes, jewelry, spa treatments, weekend trips to exclusive resorts with her friends, tens of thousands of dollars in superfluous purchases. Meanwhile, there wasn't a single record of expenses related to Helen, no medication purchased, no doctor's appointments scheduled, no spending on specific food for an elderly person. Nothing. Robert picked up his phone and sent messages to his assistant, Carla, cancelling all his meetings for the day. Then he called his main partner, explaining he had a family emergency and needed a few days off. For the first time in 15 years, work would take a back seat. As the sun began to light up the garden, Robert heard light footsteps coming down the stairs. It was Helen, wearing the robe he had given her the night before. She looked lost, as if unsure if she was allowed to be there. "Good morning, Mum. Come, sit with me. I'll make breakfast for both of us." "Honey, you don't have to." Her voice was hesitant. "I can go back to my room. I don't want Jessica to wake up and see me down here." "Mum, this is your house as much as it is mine. You can be wherever you want, whenever you want. And I want you to have breakfast with me. It's been a long time since we've done this together, hasn't it?" Helen nodded slowly and sat at the kitchen table. Robert made fresh coffee, toast, scrambled eggs, cut fruit, and fresh juice. He placed everything in front of his mother and sat beside her. He watched as she ate, calmer this time, though she still glanced frequently toward the stairs. "Mum, I want you to tell me more about what's been happening here. I know we talked last night, but I need details. I need to understand exactly what's been going on these last few months." Helen took a sip of coffee, her hands still trembling slightly. "Honey, I don't want to cause trouble in your marriage. Jessica was always very clear about that. She said if I told you stories, she would have proof that I'm confused, that I make things up. She said you wouldn't believe me." "Mom, I will believe you. Every word. I saw you last night going through the trash. That's not made up. That's real. And I need to know everything so I can protect you." Helen took a deep breath and began to speak. She told him about the day she tried to go to church, and Jessica said she couldn't because she had the flu, even though she wasn't sick. She told him about the times she asked to see a friend's new grandchild, and Jessica said it was dangerous because the baby could catch some disease from an old person. She told him about the phone in her room that mysteriously stopped working, and when she asked to use the one in the living room, Jessica was always busy or said the phone was broken. She also told him about the day she tried to order delivery from a bakery she liked, and Jessica intercepted the delivery guy at the door, paid with her own money, and said Helen had mental problems and shouldn't receive packages without supervision. After that, the bakery stopped accepting orders in her name. The more Helen spoke, the more Robert felt the anger build inside him. Jessica had completely isolated his mother from the outside world. She had cut off all her connections, all her chances to ask for help, all her sources of comfort and joy. "Mum, do you know if Jessica had you sign any documents in the last few months?" Helen thought for a moment. "Yes, honey, a few times. She said they were papers to renew my bank card or authorizations for my health insurance. I signed because she said it was necessary." "Why?" Robert's stomach churned. "Do you remember how many papers you signed?" "A few. Maybe 3 or 4 different times. Jessica would always bring the papers, show me where to sign, and then take them away quickly. She said it was so I wouldn't have to worry about bureaucracy." "I'm going to look into that, Mom. But first, I need you to tell me something. Has anyone ever hit you? Have they ever hurt you physically?" Helen looked down, and Robert had his answer before she even spoke. "Sometimes when I insisted too much on leaving my room, or when I tried to get food from the kitchen when I was really hungry, Jessica would grab my arm to take me back. She'd hold on tight. It left bruises. One time I fell because she pushed me, but she said it was an accident, that I was just unsteady on my feet." "Let me see. Your arms, Mum." Helen hesitated, but then she rolled up the sleeves of her robe. Robert felt bile rise in his throat. There were marks on her arms, old bruises that were turning yellow, clear signs that someone had gripped her forcefully. On one wrist, there was a circular mark as if she had been tied or restrained in some way. Robert took out his phone and took pictures of the marks, even though he knew those images would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Mom, do you trust me?" "Of course I do, honey. I always have." "Then I need you to stay here in the kitchen while I go upstairs. I'm going to talk to Jessica now, and after that I'm going to make some important calls. But I don't want you to worry. Everything is going to be okay. I promise." He left his mother finishing her breakfast and went upstairs. His heart was pounding, but his determination was stronger than any fear. He entered the master suite without knocking. Jessica was sitting at her vanity, fixing her hair, dressed in a stylish workout set. She turned as Robert entered and smiled. "Good morning, honey. I thought you'd already left for work. What a surprise to see you still here. I cancelled my appointments. I need to take care of some things at home first." Jessica's smile faltered slightly. "Things related to what we talked about last night. Among other things." Robert leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "Jessica, how long does my mother go without food when you decide she needs to be punished?" Jessica's expression changed. The smile vanished, replaced by something colder. "Robert, I don't like your tone. Your mother isn't punished. She's cared for. And sometimes caring means setting boundaries. Your mother is stubborn, manipulative. If I'm not firm with her, she does whatever she wants, causes problems, puts her own health at risk. Puts her health at risk by asking to use the phone. Puts her health at risk by wanting to go to church. Puts her health at risk by asking for food when she's hungry." Jessica stood up from the vanity, her eyes flashing with something Robert had never seen before. "You don't understand, Robert. You're not here. You spend all day at the office, traveling, in meetings. I'm the one who deals with your mother every single day. I'm the one who puts up with the tantrums, the whining, the demands. Do you think it's easy to take care of an elderly person? Do you think it's simple? It's not. Caring isn't locking someone in their room. It's not leaving them without food. It's not grabbing their arms so hard it leaves bruises. I saw the bruises, Jessica. I saw every single one of them." Jessica turned pale for a moment, but quickly composed herself. "Your mother is frail. Any touch leaves a mark. She falls on her own, hurts herself, and then makes up stories. It's typical for people her age, especially those who are starting to have cognitive issues. My mother does not have cognitive issues." "Are you a doctor now?" Jessica crossed her arms, adopting a defensive posture. "Because I've spoken with several professionals, Robert, and they all said it's normal for elderly people to get confused, to invent situations, to become paranoid. Your mother needs professional help. She needs to be properly evaluated. And maybe, for her own good, she needs to be in a place where she can receive specialized care." Robert felt his blood run cold. This was it. This was exactly what Jessica was planning. To get Helen out of the house, to put her somewhere far away, to isolate her completely. "My mother is not going anywhere. She's staying here, with me. And you." Robert took a step forward. "You are going to explain to me exactly what's going on. You're going to explain why my mother was digging through the trash for food. You're going to explain why her room is cold, dirty, and has no hot water. You're going to explain everything now." Jessica stared at him for a long moment. Then something in her face shifted. The mask of the perfect wife fell away completely, and what remained was cold and calculating. "You want the truth, Robert? Fine, I'll tell you the truth. Your mother is a burden, a huge burden that is ruining our life. She consumes time, energy, money. You promised you would take care of her, but I'm the one who does it. I'm the one stuck in this house. While you're out building your empire, I have to deal with a stubborn old woman who doesn't know her place." Robert felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "Her place? She's my mother, Jessica. She doesn't have to know any place. This is her home as much as it is ours." "No, Robert. This is our home, yours and mine, not hers. She's here because you insisted, against my wishes from the very beginning. And I tried, I swear I tried, but she's impossible. Always wanting attention, always meddling where she's not wanted, always being an obstacle to the life I want to live." "The life you want to live?" Robert felt his anger explode. "And what life is that, Jessica? The life of spending thousands of dollars on clothes while my mother starves? The life of going to spas and resorts while my mother is locked in a room without hot water? Is that the life you want?" Jessica took a step forward, her eyes now blazing with rage. "Yes, that's exactly the life I want. I didn't get married to be an old lady's babysitter. I married a successful businessman expecting a life of comfort, travel, and parties, not to be a nurse to a boring old woman." Robert felt something break inside him. It wasn't just anger. It was profound disappointment. How had he not seen this before? How had he married someone capable of such cruelty? "Get out of my room, Robert," Jessica pointed to the door. "Get out now. And when you've calmed down, when you stop acting like a spoiled brat defending his mommy, we can talk like adults." Robert left without another word. He walked down the stairs with firm steps and went straight to his office. He picked up the phone and called his personal lawyer, Mark Taylor, a serious and competent man who had handled his affairs for years. "Mark, I need you at my house. Now, it's urgent." While waiting for the lawyer to arrive, Robert remembered something he had installed months earlier after a break-in attempt at a neighbor's house. There were security cameras all over the property, external cameras, but also some internal ones, installed in the hallways, the living room, and the kitchen. At the time, Jessica had complained, saying she didn't like the idea of being recorded inside her own home. Robert had agreed not to install cameras in the bedrooms and bathrooms, but had kept the ones in the common areas. He accessed the system from his office computer. The recordings were stored in the cloud for 90 days. He began to review the footage from the past few weeks, fast-forwarding the videos, looking for anything involving his mother. What he saw over the next few hours completely destroyed him. There were scenes of Helen trying to enter the kitchen and being blocked by Jessica. Scenes of her being led back to her room, clearly against her will. One particularly disturbing scene showed Helen getting a glass of water in the kitchen and Jessica snatching the glass from her hand, throwing the water out, and pointing a finger in her face while saying something that silent cameras couldn't capture. There was a scene where Helen appeared in the living room at 2 in the afternoon, clearly hungry, trying to reach a fruit bowl. Jessica entered, took the fruit bowl, and carried it away. Helen just stood there, with an expression of absolute defeat, before turning back toward the stairs. In another recording, Helen tried to use the phone in the living room. Jessica entered and, without her mother-in-law noticing, unplugged the cord from the wall. When Helen tried to dial and couldn't, Jessica pretended to check the phone and said something, probably making up a technical excuse. The most devastating scene showed Helen coming downstairs late at night, clearly hungry, walking slowly to the kitchen. She picked up a piece of bread that was on the counter and began to eat it right there, standing, as if afraid of being caught. Jessica appeared in the doorway, crossed the kitchen in quick strides, ripped the bread from Helen's hand, and pushed her toward the stairs. His mother stumbled, nearly fell, and Jessica grabbed her by the arm, obviously with force, pulling her back upstairs. Robert had to pause the video. He put his face in his hands and cried. He cried for the mother who had suffered in silence. He cried for his own blindness. He cried for the lost time. He cried for having failed so completely the person who loved him most in the world. The doorbell rang. It was Mark, the lawyer, arriving with a briefcase. "Robert, what's going on? You sounded urgent on the phone." Robert led him to the office and closed the door. For the next hour, he told him everything. He showed him the pictures of the bruises on Helen's arms. He showed him the security camera videos. He showed him the bank statements with Jessica's excessive spending and the complete lack of expenses related to his mother. Mark watched it all in silence, his face growing more and more serious. "Robert, this is extremely serious. We're talking about gross negligence, emotional and psychological abuse, and possible embezzlement if she really had your mother sign documents under false pretenses. You need to act fast." "What do I do?" "First, your mother needs a complete medical evaluation. We need to document her health status, the weight loss, the bruises. Second, we need to check for any improper financial transactions." "You said your mother mentioned signing documents." "Yes, Jessica told her they were for renewing a bank card, health insurance authorizations." Mark shook his head. "We need to verify that. If there was a transfer of assets or power of attorney granted under duress, that's a crime. Third, you need to take immediate protective measures. Your mother cannot be exposed to any more abuse. And fourth, depending on what we find, it may be necessary to take legal action against your wife." Robert took a deep breath. "Do whatever it takes. My priority is protecting my mother. Everything else comes second." Mark spent the next few hours making calls. He scheduled an appointment with a trusted geriatrician for that very afternoon. He contacted a psychologist specializing in trauma and abuse to assess Helen's emotional state. He requested all statements and transactions from the financial institution for the accounts in his mother's name. Meanwhile, Robert called Helen into the office. He gently explained that she would need to go to a few doctor's appointments, that it was for her own good to document her health and ensure she received all the proper care. Helen agreed, but was clearly nervous. She asked several times if Jessica knew if it was okay, if she wasn't causing too much trouble. "Mom, you're not causing any trouble at all. I'm taking care of you, like I should have from the beginning. And you don't need to worry about Jessica. She will no longer have any control over your life." That afternoon, Robert took his mother to see Dr. Henry Morris, a respected geriatrician Mark knew personally. The doctor examined Helen carefully. He weighed her, measured her, checked her blood pressure, ordered blood tests, and photographed the bruises on her arms. After the consultation, he called Robert in to talk privately. "Your mother is severely malnourished. She's lost at least 25 pounds in the last few months. Her blood pressure is out of control because she hasn't been taking her medication properly. There are clear signs of recent physical trauma on her arms and wrists, and when I spoke with her, I noticed severe anxiety, fear of reprisal, behavior typical of someone who has lived under prolonged abuse. Does she have cognitive problems? Dementia, confusion?" Dr. Morris shook his head. "From what I could assess today, no, she is lucid, oriented, and answers all questions appropriately. What she has is psychological trauma caused by prolonged stress, isolation, and constant fear. With proper treatment, the right diet, and a safe environment, she will recover. But if she had remained in that situation, Robert, in a few months we would be talking about irreversible problems." The doctor's words confirmed everything Robert already suspected, but hearing them from a professional made the reality even more brutal. After the medical appointment, he took Helen to the office of the psychologist Mark had recommended, Dr. Patricia Andrews. The session lasted almost 2 hours. When they left, Helen was visibly emotional but seemed a little lighter, as if she had finally been able to talk about everything she had kept inside for so long. That evening, when they returned home, Jessica wasn't there. She had left a note saying she had gone out to dinner with friends and would be back late. Robert felt a huge sense of relief. At least for one night his mother could sleep in peace. He prepared a light dinner for the two of them. They sat at the kitchen table, just mother and son, for the first time in months. They talked about simple things, about the flowers in the garden that Helen used to tend to before she was forbidden, about old recipes she loved to make, about memories from Robert's childhood when it was just the two of them against the world. After dinner, he helped his mother up to the guest room, which would now be permanently hers. He had changed the sheets to fresh, soft ones, placed fresh flowers on the nightstand, and turned on the heat to keep the room comfortable. Helen looked around with tears in her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had taken care of her like this. So long since she had felt safe inside her own home. "Sleep well, Mom. I'm right in the room next door. If you need anything, just call me." "Thank you, honey." Her voice was soft. "For saving me." Robert kissed her forehead and left the room. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall and let the tears fall again. But this time they weren't just tears of pain. They were also tears of determination. He would not let anyone hurt his mother again, no matter the cost. He went back to his office and continued reviewing the documents Mark had obtained. The bank statements from Helen's account showed strange activity, regular transfers to an account he didn't recognize, large cash withdrawals that made no sense for a person confined to the house. He called Mark, even though it was almost midnight. "Mark, I need you to investigate these transfers, this account that's receiving money from my mother. Find out who it belongs to. I'm already on it. We should have answers by tomorrow. Robert, are you prepared for what might come?" "I am. Do what you have to do. My mother was abused in my own house, under my roof, while I was too busy to notice. Now I'm going to get justice, no matter who I have to face." He hung up the phone and looked out the office window. The night was clear, the stars shining over Connecticut. Somewhere out there, Jessica was having dinner with friends, probably laughing, probably maintaining the perfect image of a devoted wife. She had no idea that the world she had built with lies and cruelty was about to come crashing down. Robert thought of his mother, finally sleeping peacefully upstairs. He thought of all the days she had suffered in silence. He thought of all the nights she had spent hungry, scared, and cold. He thought of how much time he had wasted focusing on the wrong things, while the most important person in his life was wasting away inside his own home. Never again. He made that promise to himself, looking at his reflection in the dark window pane. Never again would he be absent. Never again would he put work, money, or anything else above the person who truly mattered. And never again would he allow anyone to hurt his mother. The battle was just beginning. Robert knew Jessica wouldn't give up easily. He knew she would fight, lie, and try to twist reality as she always had. But now he had proof. He had witnesses. He had the truth on his side. And most importantly, now he had time. Time to care. Time to protect. Time to finally be the son Helen had always deserved. The next morning brought answers Robert wasn't prepared to receive. Mark called early, his voice tense. "Robert, I need you to come to my office. We've discovered some very serious things. I'd rather not discuss it over the phone." Robert left Helen in the care of Anna, a private nurse Mark had recommended who was starting that day. She was a kind, experienced, middle-aged woman who immediately formed a warm connection with his mother. For the first time in months, Robert could leave the house without worrying about leaving Helen vulnerable. At Mark's office, in a building in downtown Stamford, the lawyer already had all the documents spread across the conference table. His face was grim, and Robert felt his stomach tighten before a single word was spoken. "Sit down, Robert. What I'm about to show you isn't easy." Mark began to explain. The transfers from Helen's account were going to an account in Jessica's name. Over the last 8 months, more than $200,000 had been moved. Small, regular transfers that, when added up, constituted a significant portion of Helen's retirement and savings. But it didn't stop there. Mark placed copies of documents he had obtained from the county clerk's office on the table. Helen had signed a broad power of attorney in Jessica's name 6 months ago. A document that gave her daughter-in-law the power to manage accounts, sell assets, and make financial decisions. And more recently, just 2 months ago, she had signed a deed gifting a small apartment she owned in Astoria, Queens, a property she rented out for a modest monthly income. Robert felt his blood boil. "My mother didn't know what she was signing. Jessica tricked her." "I know." Mark pushed another document forward. "And I can prove it. I spoke with Dr. Andrews, the psychologist who saw your mother yesterday. She's already prepared a preliminary report stating that Helen was under severe psychological duress, that she lacked clarity about her financial decisions due to her state of emotional vulnerability. Combined with Dr. Morris's medical report, we have a solid basis to nullify all these documents. And the apartment transfer, can it be reversed? We can try, but it will be a long legal battle. The important thing now is to take immediate protective measures. I've already prepared a petition for a temporary injunction on your mother's accounts and to transfer the administration of her assets to you as her son and legal guardian. I'm also going to request a freeze on the apartment until the situation is resolved." "Do it. Do it all." Robert rubbed his face with his hands. "Mark, how did I not see this? How did I let this happen?" "You trusted her. And people like Jessica are experts at manipulating that trust. She created a careful narrative. She isolated your mother. She discredited any attempt she made to ask for help. It was systematic, Robert. It was calculated." At that moment, Robert's phone rang. It was an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Mr. Robert Miller?" The voice on the other end was female, hesitant. "My name is Joanna Sanchez. I worked at your house until about 6 months ago. I need to talk to you. It's about your mother." Robert's heart raced. "How did you get my number?" "A friend who still works on your street gave it to me. I heard you're looking into what happened to Mrs. Helen, and I need to tell you what I saw, but I can't talk on the phone. Can we meet?" Robert looked at Mark, who was listening to the conversation. "Where are you?" "At the Stamford Town Centre. I can wait as long as you need. But I really need to talk to you." Half an hour later, Robert and Mark were sitting in a coffee shop at the mall, waiting. Joanna appeared a few minutes later, a woman in her 40s, her hair in a ponytail, a nervous expression on her face. She sat down quickly, looking around as if afraid of being seen. "Thank you for coming, Joanna," Robert said in a calm voice. "You said you worked at my house." "I worked there for 3 years, sir. I was in charge of cleaning and helped with Mrs. Helen. I was very fond of her. She was such a sweet, kind woman. She treated me like family." "Why did you leave?" Joanna looked down. "I was fired. Mrs. Jessica said I was stealing. It wasn't true. I've never stolen anything in my life. But she said she had proof that she would report me to the police if I didn't leave immediately and sign a paper saying I was resigning for personal reasons. I was scared. I have 3 kids to raise. I couldn't risk having trouble with the law, so I signed and left." "And why are you here now?" "Because I couldn't live with myself." Joanna wiped away the tears that were starting to fall. "Because when I left that house, Mrs. Helen was fine. She was happy. We talked every day. I'd take her out to the garden, help her with her flowers. We'd bake cakes together in the kitchen. And after I left, everything changed." "How do you know it changed?" "Because I tried to call her several times. I wanted to know if she was okay, but the phone never answered. Then one day I went to the house, rang the doorbell. Mrs. Jessica answered and said Mrs. Helen was sleeping, that she couldn't have visitors, and that I shouldn't call or show up there anymore. She said if I insisted, she'd call the police and claim I was harassing the family." Joanna pulled her phone from her purse and started scrolling through photos. "But before I was fired, I noticed something was wrong. Mrs. Jessica started to change how she acted with Mrs. Helen. She became colder, harsher. One day I saw her lock Mrs. Helen's bedroom door from the outside. When I asked why, she said it was for safety, that Mrs. Helen had been wandering at night and might fall. But I knew that wasn't true." She showed the phone to Robert. There were pictures of Helen taken a few months earlier. She was visibly healthier, smiling, watering the plants in the garden. In another photo, she was in the kitchen, helping Joanna prepare a meal. They were images of a happy, active, present woman, completely different from the frail, frightened person Robert had found rummaging through the trash. "Do you have more photos?" Robert asked, his voice hoarse. "I do." Joanna hesitated. "But some of them are not easy to look at, sir." She passed the phone over again. This time, the images were disturbing. Helen sitting in the corner of her room, crying. Helen with a half-eaten plate of food that someone had taken away. One particularly shocking photo showed Helen trying to reach something on a high shelf, while Jessica stood in the background, watching with her arms crossed, not helping. "Why did you take these pictures, Joanna?" "Because I knew that one day the truth would have to come out. I didn't have the courage to confront Mrs. Jessica directly. I was afraid of losing my job, and at the time I didn't understand how serious it was. But I took the photos as proof just in case they were ever needed." "Did you witness my wife physically harming my mother?" Joanna took a deep breath. "Once. It was a few days before I was fired. I walked into the kitchen and saw Mrs. Jessica grabbing Mrs. Helen's arm very tightly, pulling her toward the stairs. Mrs. Helen was crying, saying she just wanted a glass of water. Mrs. Jessica said she'd had enough water, that she was being dramatic. When she realized I was watching, she let go of Mrs. Helen and gave me a look of such anger that it chilled me to the bone. The next day she accused me of theft and fired me." Mark, who had been taking notes, looked at Joanna. "Would you be willing to testify about this officially, in a court of law?" Joanna nodded, determined. "I would. Mrs. Helen doesn't deserve what was done to her. She's a good, decent lady, and I won't stay quiet knowing she's suffering." Robert felt a wave of gratitude for this courageous woman who was willing to risk her own peace of mind to defend someone she cared about. "Thank you, Joanna. You have no idea how much this means. And I want you to know that I will make up for what Jessica did to you. I will clear your name and make sure you receive everything you're entitled to." "I don't want money, sir. I just want justice for Mrs. Helen." Robert spent the next few hours at Mark's office, organizing all the evidence, the security camera videos, the medical and psychological reports, the bank statements, the fraudulent documents, Joanna's photos, her testimony. Everything was carefully catalogued and prepared. "Mark, I'm going to confront Jessica today. I'm going to tell her I know everything and that she has 2 options. Either she returns everything she stole from my mother and leaves my house voluntarily, or I take legal action against her." Robert, I don't recommend that. Mark shook his head. People like Jessica don't react well when they're cornered. She might preempt you, create a different narrative, try to hurt you. I have to give her a chance. I have to believe there's still a part of her that recognizes her mistake and is willing to fix it. Mark sighed. All right, but I'll be on standby. Call me immediately if anything happens. Robert returned home late that afternoon. Anna, the nurse, reported that Helen had had a peaceful day. She had eaten 3 full meals, taken all her medication correctly, and even taken a walk in the garden. She was resting now, but seemed much more cheerful. Jessica was in the living room, flipping through a design magazine. She looked up as Robert entered, her face showing slight irritation. Where have you been all day? I thought you cancelled your appointments to stay home. I had to take care of a few things. Robert sat in the armchair across from her. We need to talk. Now. This again? Jessica closed the magazine. Robert, I already told you yesterday that your mother is confused. You're letting her manipulate you. This isn't about what my mother said. It's about what I found out. Jessica's face subtly changed. The forced smile vanished. Found out what? Robert took out his phone and opened the folder with the photos of the bank transactions. He showed them to Jessica. I found out that over the last 8 months, you've transferred over $200,000 from my mother's account to yours. I found out you had my mother sign a broad power of attorney without her knowing what she was signing. I found out you transferred her apartment into your name. I found out everything, Jessica. Jessica turned pale but quickly composed herself. Your lawyer has been digging where he shouldn't. My lawyer is doing his job, protecting my mother from someone who systematically abused her. Jessica shot up from the armchair. Abuse? You're accusing me of abuse? I took care of your mother. I'm the one who put up with her whining, her demands, her problems. And the money? She authorized me to use it. She said it was a way to compensate me for the work I did taking care of her. My mother would never say that. And even if she had, you know she was vulnerable, that she was under your constant pressure. That's financial manipulation, Jessica. It's a crime. A crime? Jessica laughed bitterly. You want to talk about crime? Let's talk. Let's talk about how you abandoned your mother, how you spent years neglecting her, working day and night, leaving her alone. You never really cared. You only care now because you found out, and your conscience is bothering you. You're right about one thing. Robert stood up too. I failed my mother. I was absent. I trusted the wrong person to take care of her. But I'm going to fix it, and you are going to return every single cent you stole from her. I didn't steal anything. That money was given voluntarily. Then you won't mind when the judge reviews the evidence and decides if it was really voluntary or if it was obtained through coercion of a vulnerable elderly person. Jessica took a step forward, her eyes now blazing with anger. You're making a mistake, Robert, a huge mistake. You're believing a confused old woman and people who just want to take advantage of you, and you're going to regret it. The only person who took advantage here was you, Jessica, of me, of my absence, of my mother's vulnerability. But it's over. You have until tomorrow morning to return the money and sign the papers to give back the apartment. Otherwise, my lawyer will file every possible action against you. Jessica stared at him for a long moment. Then, something in her face shifted. A cold smile appeared on her lips. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Robert. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I think I'm starting to find out. Jessica grabbed her purse and walked toward the door. I'm going to sleep at the apartment. I can't stand being in this house with you two anymore. But don't think this is over. It's far from over. She slammed the door on her way out. Robert stood in the living room for a long moment, just breathing deeply. He knew he had just crossed a line of no return, but he didn't regret it. For the first time in a long time, he felt he was doing the right thing. He went up to the guest room where Helen was, resting. Anna was just leaving, saying goodbye with a gentle smile. Robert went in and sat in the chair beside the bed. His mother was sleeping peacefully, her face more relaxed than he had seen it in months. I promise I'll protect you, Mom, whatever it takes. The following days brought rapid developments. Mark filed a court petition to freeze Helen's accounts and assets, transferring administration to Robert. He requested the nullification of the power of attorney and the apartment deed. presenting all the medical and psychological reports as proof that the documents were obtained under duress. The judge, moved by the severity of the case and the amount of evidence presented, granted a temporary restraining order. The accounts were frozen, the apartment transfer was suspended, and Jessica was notified that she could no longer make any decisions on Helen's behalf. Robert thought that would be the end of it, that Jessica would admit defeat and walk away. But 3 days later, he received a call from Mark that changed everything. "Robert, a police report has been filed against you." "What do you mean?" "Jessica went to a police station and filed a report against you. She's claiming you assaulted her, that you're having paranoid episodes, that you're creating a false narrative to get rid of her and completely control your mother. She also said you're preventing her from entering her own home, that she's suffering psychological and financial abuse." Robert felt the world spin. "That's a lie. All I did was confront her with the evidence." "I know. But she got ahead of it, Robert. She's trying to completely flip the narrative, to paint you as the abuser and herself as the victim. It's a risky strategy, but if she can convince someone, it could seriously complicate our case." "What do I do?" "First, stay calm. Second, have no more direct contact with her. Everything goes through me now. Third, we're going to prepare a solid defense. We have the evidence on our side. We have witnesses. We have medical reports. The truth will prevail." But Robert knew things had just gotten more complicated. Jessica wasn't just defending herself. She was counterattacking, and she was willing to destroy his reputation in the process. News of the report quickly leaked through the social circles Robert and Jessica frequented. Comments began to appear on social media, speculating about what was happening. Some supported Robert, others defended Jessica. Public opinion was divided. Jessica gave an interview to a high society gossip blog. She said she was suffering at the hands of a controlling husband, that she had discovered a dark side to him she never imagined existed. She said he was using his mother as an excuse to exert power over her, that she was afraid. Robert read the interview with a mix of anger and disbelief. Every word was a calculated distortion of reality. But Jessica was convincing. She cried at the right moments, used the right words, and built a narrative of a fragile woman that struck a chord. Mark advised Robert not to respond publicly, not to play her game, to let the evidence speak for itself at the right time. The legal battle dragged on for the following weeks. Hearings, depositions, presentation of evidence. Jessica stuck to her story, saying all the money had been authorized by Helen, that the documents were signed consciously, that she had only tried to help, but was now being unjustly accused. But the evidence against her was overwhelming. The security camera videos clearly showed the abuse. The medical reports documented Helen's state of vulnerability. Joanna's testimony confirmed everything. And when Helen was finally called to testify with the support of Robert and Mark, she told her story with a courage that surprised everyone in the courtroom. She spoke of the fear, the hunger, the isolation, the threats. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear and consistent. There was no confusion, there was no fabrication. There was only the raw truth of a woman who had suffered in silence because she was afraid of losing her son's love. Jessica's lawyer tried to discredit Helen, insinuating she was confused, that she had memory problems. But the most recent medical reports, which showed significant improvement in her health and emotional state after being separated from Jessica, contradicted that narrative. The most dramatic moment of the hearing came when the judge asked Helen directly, "Ma'am, were you clear on what you were signing when you gave your daughter-in-law power of attorney?" Helen looked at Jessica, who was sitting on the other side of the room with a cold expression. "No, Your Honor. I thought they were papers for the bank, for my health insurance. Jessica always said it was just paperwork, that I didn't need to worry. I trusted her. I thought she was helping me. Only later did I find out she was transferring my money, my apartment. When I tried to question it, she told me I should be grateful and stop complaining." "And what about the treatment you received in the house? What was it like?" Helen lowered her head and Robert saw tears begin to fall. "I was afraid to say anything, to ask for anything, to simply exist. I would spend entire days locked in my room. I would go without food because I was a bother. Once I got So desperate that I looked for food in the trash. That's when my son found me and everything changed. The judge listened to everything in silence, taking careful notes. After weeks of hearings and analysis, the decision came. The judge recognized the systematic pattern of emotional, psychological, and financial abuse. He nullified all documents signed by Helen under duress. He ordered the immediate return of all improperly transferred funds. He froze Jessica's assets until the restitution was complete. And he granted a protective order in favor of Helen, prohibiting Jessica from approaching or contacting her by any means. The ruling also permanently removed Jessica from the residence, stipulating a time frame for her to retrieve her personal belongings, but always under supervision and without any contact with Helen. Robert felt an enormous sense of relief when Mark called with the news, but he knew it wasn't over yet. Jessica could appeal, she could create more trouble, but at least for now, his mother was safe. That night, he sat with Helen in the garden. She had started tending to her flowers again, something she loved to do before everything fell apart. Her hands, once trembling, now worked with care, pruning, watering, caressing the petals. "Honey, I'll never forget what you did for me. Mom, I only did what I should have done from the beginning. Protect you, take care of you, and I'm so sorry it took me so long to open my eyes. You were building your future. I understand." "No, Mom." Robert took her hand. "My future is worthless if you're not okay. I learned that too late, but I learned it, and from now on, things are going to be different. I promise." Helen smiled, that gentle smile Robert hadn't seen in so long. "I believe you, honey. I always have." And there under the Connecticut stars, sitting in the garden that was finally a place of life and not a prison, mother and son began to rebuild what had almost been destroyed. The trust, the love, the presence, the things that, in the end, were the only things that truly mattered. The months following the court's decision brought profound changes to Robert and Helen's lives. The house in Greenwich, which had once felt like a cold museum of appearances, began to transform into a real home. Doors that had been closed were now left open. Lights that used to go out early now illuminated long dinners, conversations about life and laughter that hadn't echoed through those halls for a very long time. Helen had gained nearly 15 pounds since the situation was resolved. Her face had regained its healthy color, and her eyes once again shone with the vibrancy Robert remembered from his childhood. She woke up early every morning, made her own coffee, and tended to the garden that now flourished under her attentive care. The flowers that had once died from neglect now bloomed in vibrant colors as if they too were celebrating their newfound freedom. Robert kept his promise to change. He drastically reduced his workload, delegated more responsibilities to his partners, and turned down projects that would require his prolonged absence. For the first time in 15 years, he was coming home before 7 p.m. He had dinner with his mother. They watched her favorite TV shows together. They talked about everything and nothing, simply enjoying each other's presence. Anna, the nurse, continued to visit 3 times a week to monitor Helen's health, but her role was increasingly one of companionship rather than intensive medical care. Her blood pressure was stable, and her blood tests showed significant improvement across all indicators. Dr. Morris, during a follow-up appointment, remarked that he rarely saw such an impressive recovery in such a short time. "The secret isn't medicine, Robert," the doctor said, smiling. "The secret is love, attention, and presence. Your mother wasn't sick, she was suffering. And now that the suffering is over, her body is healing itself." Jessica tried to appeal the court's decision, but her lawyers eventually advised her to drop it. The evidence was too solid, and each new hearing only reinforced the narrative of systematic abuse. She returned the money she had transferred, signed the paperwork for the apartment, and quietly disappeared from the social circles she once frequented. Some people speculated about where she was. Others said she had moved to the Midwest, but Robert didn't care. She was out of their lives, and that was all that mattered. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Robert asked for nothing but the separation. He divided the assets acquired during the marriage equitably, even knowing she didn't deserve it. He just wanted to close that chapter of his life as quickly and cleanly as possible. During the recovery process, something unexpected happened. The story began to leak to the press, initially through vague comments on gossip blogs, then through more detailed accounts on legal news websites. The sensationalist narrative some outlets tried to create was quickly corrected when court documents became public. That's when David Brooks, a respected investigative journalist, contacted Robert. He was working on a series of reports about elder abuse in affluent families, cases that rarely came to light because the victims had no voice and the abusers had the resources to cover things up. "Mr. Miller, I know this is a sensitive time, but I'd like to talk to you about your mother's case. Not for sensationalism, but for awareness. Cases like hers happen every day, but they remain hidden behind high gates and perfect facades. Your story could help other families identify the signs, to act before it's too late." Robert was initially hesitant. He didn't want to expose his mother, to publicly relive all that pain. But after talking with Helen, who was surprisingly willing to share her experience if it could help others, he agreed. The article was published 3 weeks later. David had done a meticulous, respectful job, focusing not on the scandal, but on the devastating reality of silent elder abuse. It included interviews with experts, alarming statistics, and Helen's carefully edited testimony. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of people reached out, sharing similar stories, asking for help, reporting situations they were living through or witnessing. Robert realized the problem was much bigger than he had imagined. It wasn't an isolated case. It was a silent epidemic. It was Helen who planted the seed of the idea that would change the course of their lives again. "Honey, so many people are suffering like I did. So many people are scared, feel trapped, think they have nowhere to go, that no one will believe them. Couldn't we do something to help these people?" Robert thought about her words for days. He talked to Mark, to Dr. Morris, to Dr. Andrews, to Joanna. He consulted with public policy experts, social workers, and lawyers specializing in elder rights, and slowly an idea began to take shape. 6 months after the court's decision, Robert announced the creation of the Dignity at Every Age Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to protecting elderly victims of emotional, psychological, and financial abuse. The foundation would offer free legal support, psychological counseling, social assistance, and a hotline where anyone could confidentially report suspicious situations. Robert invested a significant portion of his personal fortune in the project. He bought a large, welcoming house in the West Village, which was renovated to serve as the foundation's headquarters. He hired a multidisciplinary team, lawyers, psychologists, social workers, all committed to the cause. And he invited Helen to be the official godmother of the project. The inauguration took place on a sunny Saturday afternoon. Dozens of people attended, local officials, professionals in the field, journalists, and above all, seniors and their families who had found in the foundation a hope for change. The house was decorated with flowers, the same kind Helen grew in her garden, a symbol that even after the cruelest winter, spring can always come. When it was Helen's turn to speak, Robert felt his heart swell. She was nervous, holding a piece of paper with notes that trembled in her hands. But when she began to speak, her voice was firm, filled with an emotion that touched every person present. "For a long time, I thought I had no value anymore. I thought I was a burden, a nuisance, someone people took care of out of obligation, not love. I spent months living in fear, hungry and cold, thinking that was what I deserved for being old, for being tired, for simply existing." She paused, wiping away the tears that were starting to fall. "But my son saved me. He not only got me out of that situation, but he gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. My dignity, my voice, my hope. And now, this foundation will do for others what my son did for me. It will show that no one, absolutely no one, deserves to be treated without respect, without kindness, without dignity, no matter their age." The audience gave her a standing ovation. There were tears on many faces. Robert, standing beside his mother, felt a deep gratitude for having had the chance to fix his mistakes, to transform all that pain into something bigger, something that could save other lives. In the weeks following the launch, the foundation received hundreds of calls, cases of isolation, financial abuse, emotional neglect, psychological manipulation. Each story was an echo of Helen's, proving she was not alone, that thousands of elderly people were suffering in silence inside their own homes. The Foundation's team worked tirelessly. Mark coordinated the legal department, offering free representation for proven cases. Dr. Andrews led the psychological department, offering therapy and support groups. Joanna, whom Robert had hired as a field coordinator, visited homes, conducted preliminary assessments, and identified at-risk situations. Robert further reduced his involvement in his business. He appointed a CEO to run the import company, remaining only as chairman of the board, attending strategic meetings once a month. His main focus now was the Foundation, ensuring that its mission fulfilled its purpose. But more important than anything, his focus was on being present for his mother. Every morning they had breakfast together. Robert had learned to make the recipes she loved: homemade breads, simple cakes, those comfort foods that brought back good memories of his childhood. They talked about their plans for the day, about the garden, about the news, about everything and nothing. On Saturdays, Robert would take Helen on outings. Sometimes they went to Central Park, where she loved to watch the people, the children playing, the couples walking hand in hand. Other times they went to Chelsea Market, where she would pick out fresh fruit, sample cheeses, and chat with the vendors who already knew her and always saved the best products for her. On Sundays they had visitors. Joanna would come with her 3 children, cheerful kids who treated Helen like a grandmother. Mark and his wife would come over for lunch. Sometimes seniors who had been helped by the Foundation would come to thank them in person, bringing cakes, hugs, and stories of overcoming adversity. The house that was once a museum of silence was now always full of life, voices, and laughter. Helen had completely blossomed. She had gained a few more pounds until she reached her ideal weight. Her white hair was now always well kept, styled in a simple but elegant way. She wore colorful clothes, something she never did in the dark times. She had started wearing lipstick again, a soft shade of pink that brightened her face. One afternoon, Robert came home to find his mother sitting at the table on the porch, concentrating on something. As he got closer, he saw that she was drawing. There were colored pencils scattered about, papers with scribbled attempts, and one drawing that was nearly finished. "What are you doing, Mum?" Helen looked up, shy smile on her face. "I'm trying to draw. It's been so long. When I was young, I loved it. But I stopped after you were born. I never had the time again. Now I'm rediscovering it. Can I see?" She hesitated, then pushed the paper toward him. It was a simple drawing made with the limited skill of someone who is relearning, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. It showed 2 figures, clearly a woman and a man, holding hands in front of a house. The house had large open windows, and in the garden were colorful flowers. The sun was shining in the sky, big and yellow. "It's beautiful, Mum." Helen took the drawing back, looking at it fondly. "Do you know what it represents, honey? It represents what I wished for most, when I was trapped in that room, when I was starving, when I thought I would never be happy again. I would draw this image in my mind, a house with open windows because I wanted freedom, flowers in the garden because I wanted beauty, and the 2 of us holding hands, because what I wanted most, more than anything, was your presence." Robert felt his throat tighten. He sat down next to his mother and held her hand, the same hand that months ago had trembled with fear and hunger, now firm and warm. "You have all of that now, Mom, and you always will. I promise." "I know, honey. And you know what I learned from all this?" Helen looked at him, her eyes shining with a wisdom gained through pain. "I learned that luxury isn't gold or money or a big house. Luxury is having someone who cares. It's being able to eat when you're hungry. It's being able to speak without fear. It's having the door open, not locked. It's being seen as a person, not a problem. That's true luxury." Robert hugged his mother, feeling gratitude overflow. Gratitude for having woken up in time. Gratitude for having had the courage to face the truth. Gratitude for having the chance to rebuild what was almost destroyed. The Foundation continued to grow. By the end of its first year, it had helped over 200 families. Cases that would have remained hidden were now coming to light. Seniors living in situations similar to Helen's were rescued, received support, and regained their dignity. The work was hard, emotionally draining, but profoundly meaningful. Robert began giving talks at companies, universities, and corporate events. He spoke about his experience, about how he almost lost his mother because he was too busy building an empire that meant nothing in the end. He spoke about the importance of being present, of paying attention, of not assuming everything is fine just because it seems to be. His talks always ended with the same plea. Look at the seniors in your lives, your parents, your grandparents, your neighbors. Really look. Don't assume they're okay just because someone says they're being taken care of. Visit, talk, pay attention. Because sometimes the greatest danger is hidden behind the doors of the most beautiful homes. Helen often accompanied him to these talks. At first, she just watched from the audience, but eventually she gained the courage to go on stage and tell her own story. Her voice, initially timid, grew stronger and more confident with each telling. She discovered she had a mission, that her pain could be transformed into a tool for change. 2 years after the foundation started, Robert received a phone call that moved him deeply. It was from a woman named Teresa, 78 years old, who had been one of the first people helped by the foundation. She was calling to say that she had just reconciled with her daughter, that she had finally escaped a 5-year situation of psychological abuse, and that she was now living in a safe place surrounded by love. I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Miller. If it weren't for the foundation, if it weren't for Mrs. Helen's story that gave me courage, I would still be trapped in that hell. Now I have my life back, I have my dignity back. Thank you. Thank you so much. Robert hung up the phone with tears in his eyes. He told his mother about the call, and they cried together, but they were tears of joy, tears of those who know that even in the deepest darkness, there is always the possibility of light. One evening, almost 3 years after that devastating discovery in the laundry room, Robert and Helen were sitting on the porch, looking at the garden she tended with so much love. The flowers were more beautiful than ever, a true spectacle of color and life. "Honey, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, Mom. Always." "Do you regret any of it? Confronting Jessica, exposing everything, completely changing your life?" Robert thought for a moment. "I regret not realizing sooner. I regret every day you suffered while I was too busy to see. But do I regret confronting her, changing my life? No, not for a second. Because those changes brought me back to what's really important. They brought me back to you. They brought me back to myself." Helen smiled, that serene smile of someone who is finally at peace. "You know, honey, I spent a long time being angry. Angry at Jessica, angry at the situation, angry at myself for allowing it. But now I just feel gratitude, because all of that, as terrible as it was, brought me here. It brought me to this garden, this house full of life, this work we're doing together. And it brought me back to you." They sat in silence for a long moment, just watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. There was a deep peace in that silence, the peace of someone who has been through the storm and reached the other side stronger, more aware, or more human. Robert thought about everything that had happened since that rainy night. He thought of his mother rummaging through the trash, the bruises on her arms, the fear in her eyes. He thought of the legal battle, the sleepless nights, the difficult decisions. He thought of creating the foundation, the lives they had touched, the stories they had changed. And he thought about how, in the end, the greatest fortune he had ever built wasn't in vaults or investments. It was right there, sitting beside him, tending to flowers, drawing dreams, living with dignity. That night, before going to sleep, Robert stopped by his mother's room to say goodnight, as he did every night. Helen was in bed reading a book, her glasses perched on her nose. When she saw him, she put the book aside and smiled. "Good night, honey. Thank you for another wonderful day." "Good night, Mom. Sleep well." "Honey, one more thing." "Yes?" "I love you, and I'm so proud of the man you've become." Robert felt his heart overflow. "I love you too, Mom. So much, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it." He kissed her forehead and left the room. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. He thought of the businessman he had been 3 years ago. That man blinded by work, by targets, by superficial success. That man had died that night in the laundry room. And in his place, someone different had been born. Someone who understood that presence is worth more than presence, that time is worth more than money, that dignity is worth more than luxury. The Dignity at Every Age Foundation continued its work, expanding to other cities, helping more and more people. Robert and Helen became symbols of hope, living proof that it's possible to rebuild after destruction, that it's never too late to do the right thing. And every time Robert closed the curtains in his mother's room, every time he saw her sleeping soundly, safe and at peace, he remembered the promise he had made that first night, the promise to protect, the promise to be present, the promise to never again let work, money, or anything else come between him and the people who truly mattered. It was a promise he kept every day and would keep for the rest of his life. Because he had learned in the most painful way possible that a man's greatest wealth isn't what he builds in the outside world. It's in the love he cultivates within his own home. It's in the dignity he protects. It's in the presence he offers. It's in the eyes of his mother, who can finally sleep in peace knowing she is loved, protected, and valued. And nothing, absolutely nothing, was worth more than that. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Robert and Helen has deeply touched your heart. This narrative reminds us that true wealth isn't found in material achievements, but in the presence, care, and love we give to those who matter most. If you were moved by this journey of pain, resilience, and rebuilding, please leave a like, subscribe to our channel, and tell us in the comments which moment resonated with you the most. Every day we bring you intense and true stories like this one, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul and make us reflect on our own choices. Helen's story teaches us that it's never too late to open our eyes, to protect the ones we love, and to transform pain into the strength to help others. We'll see you in the next episode with another story that will stir your emotions and touch your soul. Until then, take good care of the people you love, be present, and always remember that dignity and respect are priceless.